So we don't want that. One of the biggest no's in the screenwriting world, you can just be sneaky about it. No, because otherwise it's just expected. We have to show it. I like that. A few months ago, I posted a Q&A for Paranormal Nobodies, the show that I wrote and I'm in. At the end of that Q&A, I told you guys to submit any written work you might want critiqued publicly here on my YouTube channel. A few of you submitted written work and I've been meaning to critique it on here for the month since that video, and I'm finally doing that. We're gonna do one per video. If you're interested in submitting, I'll put the form below, but for right now, I'm going to be critiquing the work End of Term by Leah. It is, I think, a short film, 26 pages, which is a little bit on the upper end of a short film. It could be possibly an episode, but I do think it's a short film. Actually, she told me, okay? Leah says, I wrote this screenplay when I was a senior in high school before getting my bachelor's degree in English and cinema. I haven't revisited it yet. It's a coming-of-age film about 3 teenage boys working on their final project of the term. It closely follows Kylan, who has no clue what he wants to do in life, as it seems like everyone around him already has a set plan. I'm concerned about the lack of depth in the plot and characters. I feel really good about the plot, but wouldn't mind extending it. My overall goal is to revisit this screenplay and rewrite it with all the knowledge I've gained from college, but having a third-party critique. It would help with the process. I also asked for the writer to share a little bit about themselves, and Leah says her name is Leah French. She's 26 years old, grew up in New Hampshire, and wants to be published as an author and screenplay writer. She's been writing since she was little and got into film when she became obsessed with YouTube in high school. Her favorite film is either Lady Bird or The Kings of Summer. I love Lady Bird. I've never seen The Kings of Summer. And she loves a mystery, thriller, or romance novels, which sounds a lot like me. I've already gone ahead and read the first page of the script before realizing that I should probably read it live with you guys because that'll be a lot more entertaining. It reminded me of the screenplays I would write in high school before I went to school for screenwriting and learned a lot of formatting rules. So some of my notes will be about that, or just kind of things that immediately scream red flag when they happen in a script, which is really common in a script written by someone in high school because there's still so much to learn, and this looks exactly like a feature film I wrote in high school when I was in my senior year. So I've got a good reference to go off of with that. But let's go ahead and read it together while I give notes. This is my first time doing this on a video. At the end of it, once I have a better idea of the full film, I'll sit down with myself, do some soul searching, and give notes that I feel Leah might actually need to create a project that is layered and interesting. I don't know if it is yet or not. I haven't read it and I don't know where it's going. So this is kind of fun. Okay, End of Term, written by Leah French. This is exactly how I formatted my first feature film. I wrote it in Google Docs and I didn't really know what to do. So step number 1, if you can, you should invest in Final Draft if you intend to be a screenwriter or you're interested in screenwriting. I think there are some free softwares or less expensive software. I will list that below. I'll have to do some research, but Final Draft is what I use. It's very industry standard and it will format everything for you. I highly recommend it. Okay, exterior, behind Will's house, day. A big ceramic vase stands with a firecracker hanging out the top. 3 blurry figures stand behind it. The camera focuses on the 3 figures as they walk forward. Okay, so right away, again, one of the biggest no's in the screenwriting world is directing as the screenwriter. Unless you are the director on this project, and that is the only acceptable time to do this. But you can be a little sneaky and you can write in a way that suggests a certain shot. Because sometimes it is frustrating, and the fact that these figures are blurred or out of focus is important for the story, but you wouldn't ever want to mention like the camera. So you might reword it to say, okay, 3 unseen figures stand behind it, or like 3 nondescript figures stand behind it, and they're like revealed in their approach or something like that. And then it says, Will, lighter. Kylan hands it to him, goggles. Alex hands it to him. Will puts on his goggles and kneels down next to the vase. He grabs the wire before nodding to the side. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know Will, Kylan, or Alex yet, and I don't know what about them is particular. So you're going to want to introduce these characters in their own line. You're going to capitalize their name. You don't always need to define them in a character description, like in parentheses is what a lot of people do. Sometimes I just skip that altogether and I'll say like Dylan Claypool, and I'll just put her age, 16, 17, she has her birthday throughout the show, and then I'll show who she is through the next thing she's about to do. But you could say 3 figures, Will, Kylan, Alex, all capitalized, and then move on. Oh, I understand what's happening here. Will says lighter, and then he's handed the lighter. That took me like 3 minutes to fully understand. So we don't want that. We want it to be immediately understood. So this would be longer. This would be like Will, dialogue, lighter, action line, Kylan hands it to him, not in parentheses. Yeah. Will puts on his goggles and kneels down next to the vase. He grabs the wire before nodding to the side. Will, don't be fooled, boys. This may look like an easy task, but it's a precision operation that must be handled with the utmost. Will holds up the lighter and flicks it a few times. And then Kylan says, will you shut up and light the damn thing already? Will sighs and flicks the lighter before bringing the steady flame to the wire. The boys run back. The firecracker wire burns down to the end. The vase blows up in slow motion for the first few seconds and reverts back to normal speed. Again, the slow motion thing, you want to just suggest that. Like it's like time stops or something like that. The boys cheer and scream with excitement. Will bows and repeats, thank you. And another thing is that you're not going to want more than 4 action lines. If there's like a chunk of action, every 4 lines you're going to want to create a new paragraph. Kylan looking at his phone. Shit, we gotta go. Will and Alex take off running towards their bikes and take off their goggles. Kylan lags behind, stuffing fireworks into his backpack. The 3 boys rush out of frame with their bikes. Exterior biking montage day. For the location, you're not gonna wanna put the biking montage part here because it's not a location. So you're gonna wanna put street, so like exterior street day. You might want to put continuous if this is continuous or starts off from where we picked up. The boys bike through a neighborhood side by side in the middle of the road. They bike on sidewalks and jump curbs to get to school. But montage has specific formatting. I'll put my suggested formatting on here, but I think everyone does it slightly different, but I'll show you how I do it when I want a montage. I love montage. They bike up a small path that leads to their high school. The boys jump off their bikes and carry them. The camera pans out to establish setting. Again, a lot of camera movements here. You can just be sneaky about it. Really important. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but it really is super important. It's like a big no-no. Interior English class day. Also, like a lot of these locations are in parentheses. They don't need to be. The bell rings and Kylan walks in. Students file in after him. There's also capitalization things you're gonna wanna do. So students, for example, should be all capitalized. You wanna capitalize anything that needs a little bit of extra emphasis. That might be a prop, that might be a group of extras. You're just gonna wanna make sure that it's capitalized. The bell rings and Kylan walks in. Students file in after him. He sits down and pulls out a notebook, opening it to a page with end of the term project ideas written at the top. Mr. Spiegelman walks in and places his bags on his desk in front of the room. Mr. Spiegelman says, emptying his bag, dull tone, "Good morning, everyone." The class mutters a gloomy good morning to Mr. Spiegelman. Music plays over muted scene. Kylan taps his pencil against his paper and stares down at the empty page. You can say that there's music playing. Music is going to be in the project, you know what I mean? I wouldn't say that there's going to be music in the project unless it's significant to the story that there's music here, because otherwise it's just expected. You definitely don't want to list a specific song, but you can maybe list the genre, and that'll help the reader understand the pacing of this montage. And there's a lot of like shortcuts that I'm seeing in the script. Like everything should be truly listed here. If the class says good morning, then he's like, it's class, and that's a line for everyone to say good morning. The class mutters a gloomy good morning to Mr. Spiegelman. Music plays over muted scene. Kylan taps his pencil against his paper and stares down at the empty page. Interior art room day. Music plays over muted scene. Will shapes a giant clay globe. A smile spreads across Will's face as his art teacher walks by and pats his shoulder with approval. I like that. Interior auditorium day. Okay, this is the montage. Music plays over the muted scene. We don't need to keep saying music plays over the muted scene. We know. Once you've said it, you don't need to keep saying it. You're just gonna have start of montage, end of montage. Interior auditorium day. Music plays over the muted scene. The camera zooms away from Alex's face. His lips are moving and he looks to be singing. So what we're seeing here is that Kylan feels lost. He doesn't know what his end of turn project is gonna be. Meanwhile, Will is an artist and Alex is a musician, a singer. Crew member comes up and stands next to Alex, moving him more to center stage and pointing to the lights and the curtains, saying something inaudible. What I really like about this right now is that you're showing what each of these boys do, and you're actually showing physical action, what they do. So I know I've been giving some notes, but one of the biggest things that people fail to do is only write what can be physically shown, because screenplays are a visual art. When you're writing a novel, you can say things that aren't actually shown, but in a screenplay, everything has to be visible. A lot of people might give background on a character that you can't see that background on screen. What's an example of this? Like they might write, oh, this character is doing this, they've been up since 6 a.m. You'd have to instead say, they have bags under their eyes. Yeah, that would probably be the best way to do that or something. You have to get creative on how a certain piece of information can be seen instead of told. That's praised in the writing world, the novel writing world, but in the screenplay world, it's a necessity. And a lot of new writers fail to do that. You have not failed to do that. And I think that deserves a round of applause. Although, let's keep going, we'll see. Despite that, I am having a hard time differentiating between Kylan, Alex, and Will, just because I didn't really get a solid introduction of each of them. They were introduced at the same time and I can't visually see them. So it's a little bit hard to remember who's who. But I would possibly recommend giving them each their own specific moment, especially in the script, so that the reader understands what's going on, because sometimes that can be difficult. Interior hallway day, we're still in the montage. Alex and Kylan are walking down the hall. Okay, that's the singer and the guy who doesn't know what he's doing with his life. Having a conversation, and Will appears from a side hallway to interrupt. They walk towards Kylan's locker. All right. There's one. They walk towards Kylan's locker. They walk towards a locker would be more appropriate, because I don't know where Kylan's locker is. Instead, they're walking down the hall towards the locker, and then once they reach Kylan's locker, Kylan will go and open the locker, and that's when we'll know it's Kylan's locker. So that's an example of what I was saying earlier, where sometimes screenwriters will say something that the audience can't see. But still, that's a little misdemeanor. So far, everything's been really nice and visual. Will, quick question. Can you guys describe the moment when you experienced your biggest adrenaline rush? I really like the dialogue. Kylan, what the hell are you talking about, Will? Will, just answer the damn question. Alex, adrenaline rush? What do you mean by adrenaline rush? Like a near-death experience? Or, Will, no, Alex, like when have you felt the most alive? And Kylan says, probably that time when you, points to Will, lit a firework at band camp and we ran like hell so the band directors wouldn't catch us. Chuckling, the boys join in. You don't want to tell the actors what to do either. So if you do put little acting notes, you want that to be very, very minimal. Only super important things that the actor really needs to do this because it's a part of the story. Alex, speaking of fireworks, when are we going to blow up that thing you're making in ceramics? Well, that thing is a giant globe and it should be done by this weekend. It's being fired as we speak, then all I have to do is paint it. Pause. You could do like a ... instead of a pause. And I carved out the continents so when it explodes, the pieces fly off in burning chunks of awesomeness. Acting out the explosion. See, acting out the explosion would probably be an action line that would be acceptable there because the actor might not do it and it might be important for the character that they do. Alex, whoa. The school play is this weekend. Can we postpone it until next weekend? Will, since when does drama club take priority over ceramic explosions? Alex gives him a look. Fine, if it's such a big deal, can Chucky and I here get the free tickets? I think calling him Chucky might be confusing because I don't think we've really established everyone's name yet for the viewer. I'm also a little confused by it, but I appreciate the energy it holds. Kylan, screw free tickets, man. I would pay to see this kid in stage makeup. Will to Kylan, I could even lend him my mom's tights. Will and Kylan erupt in laughter. Alex, clearly angered, shoves Will's shoulder. Will points at Kylan, trying to blame him. A loud noise over the speakers directions their attention towards the ceiling. Announcer lady, amused tone, excuse the interruption. Will Kylan, Mastro, and Sarah Abrams please report to the guidance office? And Alex says, what's that about? Kylan, I have a meeting with Mr. Ward about my term project. You still haven't submitted that? Kylan says, unfortunately, I've gotten myself into a creative rut. Will, wasn't the deadline for that like last week? Kylan nods, dude, you're screwed. Kylan, thanks for the moral support. And then Alex said, Mr. Ward's gonna rip you a new one. Will, can I record it? Kylan playfully shoves Will as the camera zooms out. Kylan walks past them down the hall. Interior guidance office day. Kylan sits across the desk from his guidance counselor, Mr. Ward. So Kylan, any progress? And Kylan says, I made a list. Mr. Ward waves for Kylan to show him. Kylan pulls out his notebook, flips to the correct page, and hands it to Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward clears his throat and stares at the page. All you wrote is the title. What have you been doing this past week? Kylan says, I think I've made some pretty great progress since our last meeting. I didn't even have the title then. Slightly sarcastic. Oh yeah, you would want to say slightly sarcastic. You'd hope the actor can get that. Mr. Ward says, sighing, you know what I see here, Kylan? And then we have written in parentheses, voiceover begins, Kylan's walking home in slow motion. I'll put the correct format of this on screen. I see this blank page as an opportunity. I know you have ideas in that little red head of yours. So start with things you're good at, like English. Mr. Spiegelman's always saying splendid things about you. Try writing something. Kylan walks out of the overlaying clip and the camera pans to him sitting in the guidance office. Kylan, what would I even write about? That's up to you. You could write about paint drying for all I care as long as you meet the project requirements. No more screwing around. There better be a term project form filled out with your name on it on my desk by the end of next week. Gotcha, sir. You see Kylan, voiceover of Kylan walking up to his house before closing the door. I like what you're trying to do with it. It's my job to help students like you reach their full potential. Remember that when you're accepting your first Nobel Peace Prize. Interior Kylan's room, night. Kylan's face is cast by the glow from his computer. The only light in the room is a small lamp in the corner. Kylan leans and rests his chin on his hand. The screen is shown and the word essay is typed out. It stares back at Kylan tauntingly. A tapping noise at the window catches his attention. A rock soon flies in and lands on his keyboard. A note is rubber banded to it. He picks it up, takes off the note, and reads it. The word Operation Garrison is written in Sharpie. Kylan smirks and opens his drawer to reveal goggles. He grabs his backpack before hurrying out the door. Exterior, outside Kylan's house, night. The scene opens to a garage and a flashlight swinging around inside. Banging and inaudible muttering is heard. The garage door opens after a pause of silence. A bike is tossed underneath and Kylan crawling out. He yanks the door closed and leads his bike down the driveway. The camera points down a small street as Kylan's bike races past into view. He bikes out of his neighborhood and he uses a shortcut through the woods. Exterior Garrison basketball court, night. Kylan bikes into the middle of a basketball court where his two friends stand sitting on their bikes. He stands on his bike for a minute, staring at them. Alex says in an Italian accent, "You got the stuff?" And then Kylan responds in an Italian accent, getting off his bike, "Alex, I'm an honest businessman. When I say I got the stuff, I got the stuff. Alex, I'm an honest I don't know." Okay. Alex, in an Italian accent, says, "Open the bag and we'll see if you get to keep your fingers." Kylan shrugs off his backpack and steps forward towards the two boys. He unzips the backpack slowly and yanks the top open to reveal fireworks. You never disappoint. I don't know if that's very good. Italian accent coming from me. And then Will says, "All right, good fellas, Operation Garrison is in full effect." They get off their bikes and begin walking towards the field. Kylan, you guys could have texted me instead of throwing a rock through my window. And Alex says, "You see, I would have, but my phone died and I ran out of carrier pigeons." And then laughter fills the air. The boys are shown walking towards the field. Exterior, Garrison's field, night. Kylan setting up the rocket in a ceramic dragon's mouth. He sits on the ground and stares up at the sky. Alex stands next to him on his phone. Will prepares his camera. They all have goggles resting on their foreheads. "Alex, he really thinks you're capable of winning a Nobel Peace Prize? That's a long shot." And then Kylan says, "Not the point. Slight sigh. I only have until next weekend to come up with something. I'm hopeless." You've got to have at least one idea. Typing on his phone before looking up. Even if it's stupid, you can somehow spin it into something interesting. So I do have one idea. And Alex says, "What's that?" And he says, "An essay." Alex stops texting and says, "An essay? Ha, I take it back. That idea is pretty stupid." And Kylan says, "Fine, Shakespeare. What's your big idea?" Alex puts the phone in his pocket and says, "Well, I'm making a live, human wax museum of historical playwrights. Each one will have to recite a small biography written by me. There's going to be an open house and everything." Kylan says, "Shit." Will walking up to them from the background, that's not as impressive as my idea, points to himself. "I'm making the school an app where photos and videos can be posted, informing students like yourselves of school-wide events." And Kylan says, "Well, shit, how am I supposed to top those?" And then Alex says, "You'll figure it out somehow." Kylan says, "What if I can't come up with anything? What if I'm stuck in this creative rut for the rest of my life? The next thing you know, I'm failing school, and before you know it, I'm living on the streets, eating food out of a Wendy's dumpster." And Will says, "Don't be such a drama queen and come check this out." Waves his friends over to his camera. Get ready to see some major sparks. Will adjusts his camera for a long moment. "What are you waiting for? Let it rip." Will picks up the cord and fishes for a lighter in his pocket. He looks at Kylan. Kylan says, "Unleash the beast, young knightsman." The rocks shoot into the sky and erupt into bright, whimsical colors. The boys cheer and jump as the sky view of them is shown. Interior hallway day. The three boys walk down the hallway and Alex holds up 2 tickets. Alex stands in the middle between Kylan and Will as they approach Kylan's locker. Alex says, 2 tickets as per your request. They stop at Kylan's locker and Kylan reaches for the tickets, but Alex pulls away. "Promise you guys won't embarrass me." And Kylan says, "Why would we embarrass you?" And Alex says, "Because you guys are assholes." That's offensive. Kylan reaches for the tickets, but Alex pulls them away once again. And Alex says, "Seriously, you guys can't be acting like idiots." Kylan says, "We won't," slides the tickets from Alex. "That's your job." Alex, you guys don't have to come. It's not a big deal. I just read a few lines and sing a little." Kylan opens his locker and says, "We're coming. Listen, we may go overboard with the teasing at times, but we're just screwing with you." And Will says, we've never heard you sing or act, which should be pretty exciting. Am I right, Kylan?" And they both nod at each other. Kylan says, "Are you kidding? It'll be the highlight of my year." Alex smiles and says, "You guys are such goons." A blonde girl comes up to the boys carrying a stack of flyers. She smiles and hands one to Alex first before giving one to Kylan. "Her name's Becky, but I only know that because the dialogue says Becky, so we're going to want to put Becky in that action line." She says, "The art department is hosting the annual ceramics garden this weekend. You won't want to miss it." She turns to Will. "I'm very excited to see your piece on display, Will." The girl walks away with a giant smile while Kylan and Alex read the flyers. And Will says, "Screw you, Becky." Alex says, your piece is being displayed in the Arts Honor Society garden. Dude, that's sick. And Will said, let's not blow this out of proportion. It's an annual thing. Almost everyone's piece gets in. Kylan says, I can't believe you weren't going to tell us about this. And Will says, I was going to tell you guys eventually, just after it happened. Well, we're definitely going now. And Will says, fine, let's just drop it for now, okay. So how's that globe coming along? I just finished filling in some cracks, and all I have to do is paint the rest of continents. Freaking Africa's being a bitch. All I have to do is fill the rest of the continents. Freaking Africa's being a bitch. Alex says, Kai, you're gonna need to bring out the big guns for this one. I just got a shipment of the chrysanthemums and brocades. We're talking full-on 4th of July fireworks. So serious shit. The world's gonna end in flying colors, chuckling. You have to show us after school. And Kylan says, can't. I'm doing some major brainstorming for my project. Will says, why don't you just steal an idea from online or something? Because, Will, that's cheating. Plus, all the Goggle results sucked. All the Google results sucked. You'll come up with something. Kylan says, let's hope so. The bell rings and Kylan nods towards his friends before walking off. Okay, this is getting really long. Right now, we are about at the midway point. We're actually a little bit past the midway point of the script. And what I've noticed thus far is that there's not really an objective to a story that feels like there should be an objective in it. So our protagonist we know is Kylan. He's having this issue creating or figuring out his end of term project. And he has a very strong relationship with his two best friends who seem to have everything together, really, and they're good friends, very supportive. I don't really see a lot of conflict here, apart from Kylan not knowing what to do for his end of term paper, and that is a bit of an issue. When we start a story, we're usually gonna wanna spend a bit of time establishing a certain world and getting to know what our protagonist's flaw is. And pretty soon into it, especially if it's a 26-page script, we're going to want to break into what this story is actually about. We're gonna break into a different world, or really Kylan is going to break into a different world. For example, this story might be about him doing something out of the norm to figure out what his project would be. There's no structure really here right now, and that's something we can definitely work on. And we're also going to want whatever we learn about Kylan's character to be juxtaposed to his mission. So basically, in order for Kylan to get everything he wants that we're going to establish at the beginning, we're going to establish what he wants at the beginning. We're going to need him to step into a world that challenges all of his flaws and challenges who he is. We haven't really gotten any of that. There's a lot of cute character work with the boys. Their friendship is very charming, but there really isn't a lot of conflict right now. And we're already 14 pages in, so we're gonna wanna build on that. I'll have more insight as to how you can do that once I've gone through the script, but let's keep reading. Yeah, let's keep reading. Interior, Kylan's room, night. Kylan sits at his desk in his room, staring at his computer screen. He mutters to himself while messing with his hair. Various shots of Kylan pacing around his room and all that jazz. Interior, backstage, afternoon. The camera slowly moves down the long hallway behind the auditorium. Alex stands backstage with a mic that's being hooked up to him. People in costumes run by. Kylan and Will casually talk to each other in the auditorium. The scene ends with Alex taking in a huge breath. So you don't need to say the scene ends with Alex taking in a huge breath. Just say Alex takes a huge breath and then move to the next scene. Interior, auditorium, night. Alex stands in front of the stage while people are crowded around him, congratulating him. Kylan and Will walk up to him as the crowd cheers, and Will says, "You were unbelievable, man." Kylan says, "Yeah, how did you learn to sing like that?" And Alex says, "Lots and lots of practice. I have to admit, that was pretty impressive. You're more talented than I thought. Slow down, I'm not that good." "Are you kidding? You're wicked good. Props, man." A man wearing a suit interrupts their conversation, and he says, "Excuse me, Alex, may I talk to you for a moment?" Yeah, sure, I'll see you guys tomorrow." Will says, don't forget to dress up for the art show tomorrow. Kylan and Will weirdly wave goodbye to Alex and make their way out of the auditorium. Exterior, Kylan's driveway, night. Kylan sits in the middle of his driveway with Will. Everything's quiet except for crickets. Will lays on the ground, throwing a ball continuously in the air. Angles of them and the house are shown to establish setting. You'd want to start that scene with an establishing shot and then move into the action of the boys. Will, I didn't know Alex had it in him. I swear that kid's gonna end up on Broadway someday. After a short pause, Will glances up at Kylan. What's up with you? Do you ever feel like everyone's moving forward except for you? Like you're being left behind? What kind of question is that? Just because it's almost 1 a.m. doesn't mean you can start getting all philosophical and shit. And Kylan says, I'm being serious, dude. Have you ever felt that feeling? Nope, I'm always looking forward. Forget about the past. The future is where it's at. What about you? Huh? Do you ever feel like you're being left behind? He stops tossing the ball and looks at Kylan. Maybe, I don't know. God, are you still worried about your project? Come on, Kai, stop stressing over something that won't matter in 5 years. It's just a school assignment. Come up with something simple, slap it on a poster, then boom, problem solved. You're right, I'm making this a bigger problem than it needs to be. Exactly, it's like my dad always says, don't make mountains out of molehills. This project is a molehill and you're making it into a mountain, so cut it out. Okay. You know, you should be a motivational speaker. Screw you, ha ha ha. The camera zooms out to show the two boys sitting in the driveway before the scene ends. Again, we don't even say the scene ends. Interior, Kylan's room, day. Kylan fixes his tie in the mirror. He smooths it out before turning around and shoves his wallet and phone into his pocket. Kylan glances at his computer. It's open to the document where his end of the term ideas are, blank. He sighs before heading out the door, shutting it behind him. Exterior, ceramics garden, day. A small montage of the ceramics garden. Ceramic sculptures are on display as people walk around taking pictures. Kylan and Alex walk down the path into the garden. The boys take a few more steps before Will stops them. He stands near his piece as people are walking by and observing. Will waves and makes his way over to them. And Will says, wow, don't you two look spiffy? Alex says, why is nobody else dressed up? He says, I really wanted to see if you guys would actually go all out for this. You guys proved me right. And Kylan says, Will, this place looks amazing. The traffic coming here was hell. Who knew people actually liked looking at hardened chunks of clay? Actually, you guys are right on time. Alex says, right on time for what? And Will says, wait for it. Will holds up a finger and a small explosion goes off out of frame. Wasn't that awesome? And Kylan says, what the hell, Will? And Will says, don't worry, Kai, I brought my own fireworks for this one. We're saving yours for the big explosion. And Kylan said, that's not what I meant. Why'd you destroy your piece that's being showcased by the Honor Society? Doesn't this mean anything to you? And Will says, calm down, man. It's just a stupid garden. It's not like I'm being graded on this. Alex, sensing the tension, says, well, I thought it was cool. And Will says, thank you, Alex, smoothing out his tie. It's nice to know someone appreciates my work. Will and Alex walk away. The camera zooms in on Kylan's annoyed face as he angrily sighs and turns around to follow his friends. All right, we are about 7 pages to the end. Interior, Kylan's room, day. Kylan opens the door to his room and slams it behind him. He leans back and rests his head against the door. He looks at his computer, still open on his desk. Kylan pushes off the door and slams the computer shut. He roughly pulls off his tie, throws it to the floor, and runs his hands through his hair. Exterior, elementary school, afternoon. Kylan sulks as he walks behind Alex and Will. They all have goggles resting on their foreheads. They're going down a small path in the woods. And Will says, let's take a breath. This wagon's heavier than it looks. They cut their trees to picnic tables in the woods. Will pulls the wagon and parks it in front of him, taking a seat at the picnic table. Will says, Kylan, you've been pretty quiet since we picked you up. You good? Kylan says, just tired. Alex says, guys, so, remember that guy that interrupted us after the play? Turns out he owns an acting camp, and I was invited to audition for a 6-week acting camp this summer. Hey, that's great, says Kylan, and Alex says, maybe, but I'm not sure I'm gonna audition. The deadline's in like 3 days, and the whole thing seems kind of stupid. And Will says, and you'd be gone for most of the summer, which would totally suck for us. Exactly. And imagine all the ceramic explosions I'd miss out on. And Kylan says, are you serious? And Alex says, what? And Kylan says, you are so ungrateful. You should be happy that you know what you're doing. You found something you love to do. I have nothing. I can't even come up with an idea for this stupid term project. And Alex says, Kai? Looking over at Will. And Kylan says, and Will, God, you're so creative and everyone sees it but you. You're throwing your talent away. You couldn't even care less. Pauses and takes off his goggles. Keep your freaking goggles. Kylan throws the goggles to the ground. And Will says, Kylan! Kylan walks off in anger as Alex and Will watch him leave. Interior, guidance office day. Voiceover of Kylan's conversation with Mr. Ward. Kylan walks home upset from the outburst he just had. Mr. Ward says, when I was about your age, I had a rough time finding myself too. I felt stuck, like I didn't have a purpose. Flashback to the conversation in Mr. Ward's office. So again, we're going to want the flashback to be first, and then we're going to get into the scene. A lot of these things like an afterthought. We need it, like you can think of it after, but you're going to put it before because it's a flashback scene. Kylan says, so what happened? And Mr. Ward says, well, I had an epiphany. A what? Scene of Kylan walking home. An epiphany. It's like a moment of sudden realization. It just hit me out of nowhere one day and I found my purpose. Try not to think too hard about this project and maybe something will come to you. Thanks for the support, Mr. Ward, but I doubt something like that will happen to me. So you never know, Kylan. The world works in mysterious ways. And here, Kylan's room, afternoon. A shot of the computer screen is shown. Kylan sits back in his chair with a straight face. A good length of time has passed and it's dark outside. Kylan grunts and deletes essay off of his list. Kylan's screaming and hitting his desk. Damn it! Kylan shuts his laptop and lays his head down. A few seconds later, a tapping comes from the window. Kylan picks up his head and sits back just before a rock flies through the window. A small piece of paper is attached to it. Kylan picks it up and unravels the note. Garrison, now. It's written on the paper. Kylan tears the piece of paper up and sighs. He eventually gets up, grabs his backpack, and leaves his bedroom. Ooh. There's a lot. Okay, exterior, biking montage night. A short montage of Kylan biking to Garrison is shown. Exterior, Garrison Field night. Kylan bikes to the middle of Garrison Field where his friends stand with a ceramic globe. Kylan stays on his bike while Will steps forward and hands him his goggles. Kylan takes off his backpack and unzips it to reveal giant fireworks. He hands them to Will, who takes the top off the globe and stuffs the fireworks inside. Will takes out a lighter and kneels down to light the firework. He moves the flame closer to the wire but stops and hands the lighter to Kylan. Kylan flicks the lighter on and moves it towards the cord but stops. And he says, look guys, I'm sorry. And Will says, Kai, just shut up and listen for a second. And Kylan says, all right. And Will says, we don't know what we're doing, okay? Nobody at our age does. People in our grade may act like they have their shit together, but they don't. High school's the time to do dumb shit with your friends and find yourself. But nobody said it would be easy. And we're sorry for complaining all the time. You're right, we're ungrateful. Kylan says, I may have gone a little overboard. And Alex says, we needed to hear it. And Will says, and we can help you with your project. I know we haven't been very helpful these past few weeks. And Kylan says, no, I need to do this by myself. And Will says, fair enough. Have the brainstorming sessions worked yet? Kylan says, no, I just need to clear my head and hope that... Pause, and he snaps. Something hits me. Grabbing his backpack and putting it on, I gotta go. Kylan grabs his bike and takes off running before jumping on the bike. Interior hallway day. The boys stand by Kylan's locker in a small circle. Kylan is shuffling through his locker. And Will says, you had a what? And Kylan says, an epiphany. It's like a moment of sudden realization. Alex says, sounds like some kind of skin rash. I don't really believe that seniors in high school wouldn't know what an epiphany is. But, I mean, the lines are funny. I just don't, I'm surprised by it. Maybe find like another word for epiphany that means the same thing, but is a little lesser known. Kylan says, will you two be quiet and listen to me for once? He hands them both an outline. And he says, shuffling through the paper, a movie? And Kylan says, hear me out. Alex can act in it, you can direct it, and I'll write it. And Alex says, I don't know about this, Kylan. And Kylan says, come on, this is the one idea that I think will impress the school board, please. The bell rings and he shuts his locker. Okay, this is only a rough outline, and we only have a few days to plan it out, but I'm going home to type the script. I'll text you guys when I'm done. And he runs down the hall. Alex glances over at an excited Will who's smiling widely. And Will says, a movie, huh? This is going to be epic. Interior, Kylan's room, day. A printer is shown and a page with end of term by Kylan Mastro prints out and the scene cuts. Exterior, Garrison Field, afternoon. Kylan bikes into the middle of the field. Alex stands and watches Will put his wagon further into the middle of the field. Alex, looking at Kylan with a smile. And here comes the redhead. Will says, finally, now can we do this thing? And Kylan says, hold up, I gotta show you guys something. And Will says, no, no, no. Do you know how long I've been waiting to blow up this stupid globe? I can't wait any longer. And Alex says, you've survived this long. One more minute won't hurt you. And Kylan says, anyways, chuckling slightly and pulling out his phone, I sent Mr. Word my project and he emailed me back this morning. Alex takes Kylan's phone and Will crowds around it. Alex says, and the Nobel Peace Prize goes to Kylan Mastro, smiling and hitting his shoulder. Hell yeah. Alex says, technically it's supposed to be an Oscar Academy Award, but congrats, Kai. And Kylan says, hey, I wouldn't have a project to turn in if it weren't for you two idiots. And Alex says, no, you did this all on your own. And Will says, we get it, you're the next Spielberg. Now can we do what we came here for? And Alex says, you always know how to ruin a moment, Will. We need to see the project being made. Most definitely. I thought we were about to see the project being made just now. I thought that there were going to be like explosions in the project. I feel like that's essential. We can't just skip over him actually doing it. No, we have to show it. Like the explosion could be part of it. Okay, anyway. Will says, shut up and let's blow up the world together. Raging Fire by Philip plays. Yeah, you're not going to want to list a specific song that's in the script, but you can list a song like Raging Fire. The three boys set up the globe and the fireworks. The boys take off running away from the globe. The wire burns down and the fireworks explode into colorful sparks. The boys' laughter flows with the music and sparks fly everywhere. The boys look up at the sky and the lights from the fireworks reflects down on them. The boys are shouting with excitement and Kylan puts his arm around his two friends. The final scene fades out as the sky view of the three boys is shown with a final firework going off. The end. Ah! Okay. So what I want to do to give notes on how this can be better, which by the way, it's very cute. First, I want to say what's good about it. I really like the chemistry between the three characters. I think it's very wholesome and cute. There is a general through line with Kylan not knowing what his purpose in the world is and comparing himself to others. It's very centered on character rather than a plot, and that's totally okay. But I want to find ways that the two can come together a little bit more, and it can be a little bit more structured. But overall, it's very cute and very enjoyable, and I think that there are ways we can keep everything that's good about it and make it just a little bit more impactful. What I want to do here is break it down into the basic structure that most screenplays have. I don't need to have this. This is just kind of a rule of thumb that most films, even very indie, seemingly experimental films, have this structure. It can just be in very subtle ways. This is called the Save the Cat structure. There's a book about it. And you don't need to do this, but you should know the rule. You should know about it if you ever intend to break it, and I use it all the time. I find it very helpful. We're going to start with the opening image. This is the first thing we see when the camera starts. In the script, we have the ceramic piece. We have the boys out of focus. The next thing we're going to do is have the theme stated. And we have a really nice moment of having a theme stated moment with the counselor. What I would say possibly though is to bring up the moment about the epiphany. I would add something to the counselor's dialogue that will be what Kylan ends up learning. So I would boost that up. And then we have the setup. Now, what I think could be better here immediately is if Kylan isn't already in the process of not knowing what he's going to do for his end of term project. Because we start off with him already in the thick of this problem. What we could establish is that Kylan feels behind when he gets the end of term assignment. His internal problem will materialize into real life rather than just starting it with him already having this issue. There's a lot of stuff in there that shows how the boys interact with one another, and that's super cute, but we can do that while showing what the conflict is. I'm so tired. Okay. What this story is missing is a catalyst. Having the end of term assignment be introduced a little bit past the start of the film can serve as that catalyst without making any major changes to the story. That'll make a big difference. We can show Kylan not really having a thing, not really having this thing that makes him him or feeling like he does when Will has art, Alex has music or acting. Kylan's just kind of it. What we could do in the montage is have them doing all these creative things and Kylan's just like getting a sip of water in the water fountain, or like, he's not really doing anything. And then this end of term assignment comes up as the catalyst. And again, he doesn't know who he wants to be. So his objective to find this assignment is going to directly juxtapose with his character flaw. So at the same time as everything he wants, because he wants to be someone who has a thing. Yeah, this is good. That'll be very helpful for you, I think. Oh, wait, well, there's a debate. Debate is part of the Save the Cat. That'll be that first conversation where the boys are communicating. Break in Act 2. This is where I love to put in a montage. Break in Act 2 somehow should usually have like a punch. The person watching should be like, okay, we're in it now. We're in the story now. This again can be subtle, but it's really when the story starts. And next we're gonna have the B story. What's cool about the B story is that it's what's going to save the day. And that is most definitely Kylan's friendship with Alex and Will, without a doubt. So the B story is the globe and their desire to explode the globe, or like this underlying tone of this steady friendship between these three boys that all have their own thing, except for the protagonist, and it comes in to save the day. But that's like the structure where you're gonna wanna introduce. It kind of is like that a little bit, but you might just wanna make it a little bit more solid. We're gonna have fun and games. This would be the play, this would be the art show, but I think it would be even more fun if this was seen as fun and games, because right now we kind of skip the fun part about the art show and the play. I think it would be cool if we have a little bit more fun with those. And then we have the midpoint. You have this. This is when Kylan and Will have a bit of a spat. They're kind of like arguing a bit. Yeah. And then bad guys close in. This is most definitely already when Kylan has it up to here. When Alex says that he doesn't want to do the acting camp. That would be when the bad guys close in, and then all is lost. And then the dark night of the soul would be when Kylan is really frustrated. He messed things up with his friends, kind of. He still doesn't have a project idea. He just doesn't know who he is or why he's here. Now this is when that B story is going to come back in and save the day. That would be when Alex and Will throw the rock into his door, break in Act 3. Sometimes it's just helpful to see that you actually have this structure and then to really solidify it and chisel it out. It's kind of like a sculpture, and it's got the head and the body and the arms. Being able to define these different pieces of the story helps you get a little bit more detailed and structured. Okay, break in Act 3, and then we have the climax. Now, here's what this was missing most of all. Kylan has this big moment where he realizes what his project is. And apparently, he makes a film, but we don't see him make the film. And it's kind of like all these fun things are happening, but we're not seeing the fun things. We're not seeing the play. We're not seeing really the art show. And we're not seeing the film being made. So it could be a good moment where we actually see them create the short film. We don't want Kylan to only discover that he should make the short film. We want to see him be like, oh my gosh, this is my thing. Let's build on the climax. I want to see him make the film. I want to experience the joy that he felt when he finally found purpose. And then just final image. You most definitely have the final image, beautiful, all the lights going off. I think that if you apply these different things, it'll feel like that moment is more of a release, like the story has built up to that moment of the fireworks. We don't even need to see how the teacher responds to Kylan's project. I think it would be so much more moving if the film ends on the explode that thing for the project, and to see the look on Kylan's face, him with his friends, maybe they're behind the camera during the explosion, and to like see how right and how at home he feels making this movie with his best friends, which is really what's mattered to him the whole time, is being with his friends. I think that would be a very beautiful ending in that moment where he finally gets what he wanted and learned that it was really there all along with his buddies. And I know you also mentioned that you're looking to expand on the complexity of the three boys. They're not bad. What I'll say about creating complex characters is that they should each have the thing they want most, their greatest flaw, and their strength. Once you have those three things, you can start braiding them into one another so that one's greatest flaw is the exact opposite of like another's strength, or one has the strength that you need for the other to have their greatest desire, things like that. Characters will start to jump off the page a bit more. You did a great job at dialogue. It was very fun. A lot of it though was very civil. You might want to look into creating a bit more conflict in each of the scenes. Conflict did build towards the end, but there should always be, in general, something that one character wants and how are they going to get it, and that character should usually be Kylan because he's the protagonist. But overall, I mean, so I get what you're saying. You don't want this to be like an archetypal thing where all you've got is like a trio. One guy doesn't know who he is, one is an artist, and one is an actor, musician. But I do think you're being a little hard on yourself because I do understand who these characters are, generally speaking. I think you should play around with their voice. And once you play around with their voices and specific quirks they might have, that'll make you feel like they're more layered. Sometimes it's as simple as that. It's just to understand the character fully until they start making decisions of their own. And then on top of that, making sure you know for each of them what their flaw is, what their strength is, and what their greatest desire is. You've done this for Kylan, but if you do it for Will and Alex, I think it'll be even more powerful, and you'll be able to use that as you continue rewriting the story. It'll pop up and it'll start kind of trickling its way into each scene. But overall, this is a very good short film. Maybe try and shorten it a bit, because if you want to put it into festivals or submit it for screenplay competitions as a short, it is a little bit on the longer side. And I definitely think that shortening it is something you can do without ruining its integrity or interest. Leah, thank you for submitting your project. I'm so grateful that you took the time to seek out my advice, and I hope that it was helpful. Please let me know if you're going to use any of this, and I would love to read the updated version and also see the work of anyone else who would like to get any sort of feedback on their work. You can submit them in the form that I have in the description, and maybe I'll choose yours and make a video like this. Quick update on Paranormal Nobodies. That's the show that I wrote that we're currently pitching. We actually just signed the necessary contracts to really start pitching now. So it's going well, and thank you so much for your support. It means literally the world. And I hope you have the best day. I love you. I hope I write everything I should.